If you're interested in improving your fluency in English and wonder what to study in English to make faster progress, here's your answer in the first 15 seconds of this video. You have to study nothing at all. Because the biggest mistake struggling English students make that prevent them from speaking English fluently is thinking that fluency in English is like mathematics. That they have to sit down and go through pages of rules and grammar, scroll for quizzes online and look for more idioms and phrasal verbs on social media, or watch an English teacher's explanation of the present perfect for the 175th time. And I'm not saying that all of this is useless at all, but as someone who's learned to speak not just English but 4 other foreign languages fluently and confidently, I would definitely not spend more than 20% of the time on these things out of all the time I would spend learning English. Fluency in English isn't to be studied, it's to be used. And no matter your level, you'll be able to make so much faster progress in your English fluency, whether it's about understanding fast English or having confidence in speaking English with other people or remembering vocabulary, as long as you follow some of the guidelines I'll be sharing with you in this video. Learning to speak English is like completing a massive puzzle, and each puzzle piece is a building block, and some of these puzzle pieces are clearer. They are those most frequent words that are always easy to remember. Some are a bit faded, it takes a bit of an effort to remember them, and there are a few of them that are almost vanishing into thin air, which are the words that takes a lot of effort to remember, and those are the words that you keep forgetting and you need reviewing all the time, and there are loads of gaps. And your task on your journey to learn to speak English fluently is to complete as many of those gaps and find ways to connect as many of those gaps to the already existing pieces of the puzzle as humanly possible. You don't put together a puzzle by watching others putting together puzzle pieces, but by making a conscious effort to see how the pieces fit into the rest of the puzzle, which is where we arrived at the first most important topic about what it means to be learning a new skill. And the reason why asking questions like what to study in English to make faster progress isn't a valid question when it comes to building your fluency. My teaching philosophy as an English fluency and learning coach, and this is the reason my students make massive progress with their fluency, they gain confidence in just a few months of working together with us in our community, is that my job isn't to give you more information. My job isn't to show you something that you can look up on the internet or to tell you about something you can already find 1,000 videos about. That doesn't mean I don't know anything about grammar, and I'm more than happy to answer my students' question or any of your question about grammar if you leave them in the comments below. But I look at my job as more of a facilitator, someone who's there to help you learn as fast, as effectively, as efficiently, as painlessly as you can. And just like fitness coaches don't spend all the session with you demonstrating how to do the activities, my function as a language coach is also different, to help you put those puzzle pieces together, to remember more vocabulary, to gain confidence while you're speaking, so you could reach your goals as fast as humanly possible. Just like putting together puzzle pieces or working out to build your muscles won't happen if you watch other people doing it, you won't get fluent in English unless you use English. Which brings us to the importance taking action place in making super fast progress. Any action, 5-minute actions, imperfect actions, messy actions, actions done while you're shitting your pants. And this is just biology and physics. It's through experience how our brain learns. Hello English learner, welcome back to this channel. My name is Chubby. I'm an English fluency, learning and language anxiety coach, and this is a channel for serious English learners who want to learn how to make vocabulary more memorable and how to speak English more freely, comfortably and confidently with the help of improving their listening and spoken interaction. And these are topics you're interested in and you'd like to find out more about. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so I can inundate you with all the content I have here for you to help you speak English more fluently and confidently. I can't speak English fluently is one of the most common sentences people are sliding into my DMs on TikTok or writing me emails into my inbox almost every single day. And I get it. working for your fluency in a foreign language can be challenging and overwhelming. It's like wanting to build the tallest brick building ever, but not having experience even building a kennel. You right now might not be able to see whether you're able to build that big building, but is that building going to be built by overthinking, wishing, hoping, looking at the building but feeling overwhelmed, or by actually picking up the first brick, just one brick, and putting it where it's supposed to be? In this video, I shared a lot about what we do with my students whenever they tell me they feel overwhelmed with everything they have to do about their fluency. But the whole video, and make sure you watch it for all the strategies, basically boils down to this one thing: doing one small thing at a time. The reason most struggling English students spend years doubting their ability to learn to speak English fluently and not having the courage to switch off the subtitles even for 5 minutes, staying away from taking risks and using new grammar and expressions in conversations, or completely shutting out the opportunities they have to practice speaking with other people, is because they don't see themselves doing these activities. So the key to build confidence in any of the skills you might feel like you need a bit more confidence in, whether it's about listening to faster English or remembering vocabulary or speaking in front of other people, it's simply how our brain learns, is to actually start doing what scares you, what makes you feel uncomfortable, for only 1 minute. Whether it's listening to an authentic podcast and really getting used to the idea of keeping on listening because the focus shouldn't be to understand everything. Watching parts of a movie without subtitles, you could really get used to listening to English speakers and not just understand it because you understand what's written on the screen. Or coming up with creative example sentences, which I also see a lot of people struggling with. Recording themselves speaking or having conversations with others. Because when you do something for 1 minute, no matter how scared or uncomfortable you feel, you complete it. And you have that sense of success that tells you, yes, I've done it. That's where motivation keeps flowing. And you're more likely to believe that, yes, you can do it another time for 1 minute, or maybe for about 2 minutes, which I always recommend if you want to build your confidence. This is simply how I build new habits. Whenever I want my brain to feel comfortable with something I'm trying the first time and I don't have the confidence in doing it, the only way to gain that confidence is to have experienced and practiced that skill. All I do is increase the amount of time I spend doing that activity every day by 1 minute until I reach the amount of time I want to spend every day to practice that skill. Once you, let's say, record yourself for a minute the first day, what you can do is either do another minute the next day or increase the amount of time you spend recording yourself speaking another minute. So you'll be doing it for 2 minutes. And then the next day you could increase it to 3 minutes and so on until you reach the amount of time you actually want to spend every day practicing that skill. And as long as you do this and show up consistently, potentially at the same time of the day, you'll build a habit. And whether you'd like to stop feeling frustrated about not understanding everything you're listening to, or you want to find better ways to remember vocabulary or practice vocabulary, or you want to gain confidence in speaking English with other people, this video will help you with the exact strategies that I help my students with, that help them build new language learning habits and maintain them even if they have difficulties or busy days in their lives. Now let's go back to the puzzle analogy, which is how I understand vocabulary learning, and also the way I reply to struggling English students coming to me with the question, what to study in English to make faster progress. The truth is, not many people realize this. Vocabulary learning, or any kind of learning, isn't linear. This isn't what school makes us believe, because all we do is memorize vocabulary and get tested on that vocabulary. So people think they either know a word or they don't know a word, but it's actually much more complicated than that. It's never a question of whether you know the vocabulary or not, but rather a question of how well you know that vocabulary. Never ever learn a word by itself, alone, is the number one rule I go by anytime I'm learning a language. And not following this rule is why struggling English students make so many mistakes when they speak. They don't speak naturally and they keep looking for the next word when they communicate in English. When someone, and I used to see this all the time when I used to live back in Japan, where people buy a bunch of these English word books called eitangocho, which have the word, its translation, one example sentence, the translation of the example sentence, and that's it. The whole book is just a list of random words, sometimes words that we might not even use in everyday conversations in English because the books are mainly designed for exam preparation, and those people still wonder what to study in English to make faster progress. So when someone studies words from word lists, from random websites, social media, it's like laying down one puzzle piece right in the middle where there is nothing else you can connect that puzzle piece to. You not only have no idea what that one puzzle piece shows, you also have no idea how that connects into the rest of the puzzle, which is the same when it comes to learning vocabulary. If you only see the word, you not only risk not understanding the word itself, because one word can have multiple meanings, but also risk not being able to use it simply because you don't know how to use that word with other words around it. Instead, always, and I'm going to say it one more time, always learn and review vocabulary in its context to remember it 100 times faster and better. The single most common reason struggling English students don't remember vocabulary isn't that their memory is bad, it's that they don't know how to use that vocabulary when they communicate, because they don't have the memories of using that vocabulary in the past, seeing it in the way it was used, whether it was in a podcast, an interview, an article, or a book chapter. To speak more fluently and with a wider range of vocabulary, and I talk more about some of these tips in this and in this video as well, one thing we always do with my students is making sure we don't just check the translation of a word, especially using Google Translate, but we also spend a bit more time looking at as much information of the word as possible. And amazing dictionaries like the Oxford Learner's Dictionary that's designed for English learners, or the Cambridge English Dictionary are excellent tools for that. Simply looking up words and getting engaged with how that word is used, looking at the examples, the other options you have, the multiple prepositions a word could be used with, and taking notes of not only the context you found the words in, but also maybe looking at how the same vocabulary could be used in other contexts is actually an amazing way you'll remember vocabulary much better. Just imagine your brain spent considerable amount of energy and time engaging with that vocabulary when you're looking it up. So of course, it's going to do its best to remember as fast and as efficiently as possible. And here's where a lot of struggling English students trip up. They don't just study individual words, but they expect to remember them by memorizing them. We do a lot of work on vocabulary, especially remembering vocabulary in the long term in my courses. Reviewing repetition is at the core of my fluency program, the Proficiency Fortress, and all my conversation-based courses. What really helps my students remember vocabulary and also find ways to express themselves better is the fact that we focus a lot on effective reviewing activities in class where we intentionally learn vocabulary we want to remember, but also the fact that they improve their own vocabulary by reading, listening to, or watching something in English a little bit above their level. When you pick a good reading, whether it's a graded reader that I always recommend, you can find them in all sorts of different levels from beginner to advanced, or an article on like websites like the National Geographic or the Guardian or anything you're interested in, or whenever you watch a video at your level, and there are again 1,000 YouTube channels you could watch some videos on, and I don't mean English teachers channels, I mean videos in English about any sort of topic of any sort of length. You're always guaranteed to see the most frequent, most commonly used vocabulary much more often. Basically, by listening to or reading something in English every single day at your level or a bit above your level is going to help you gradually build up your vocabulary without you looking at any sort of vocabulary list or word list that would just confuse you and would be an ineffective way for you to remember vocabulary in the long term. So you can simply activate more vocabulary as you read and listen to more stuff in English, because you will be gradually building up your vocabulary instead of you spending a lot of your time ineffectively studying from word lists and trying to memorize words. And sometimes it's going to take some more time for some words to stick. And there are going to be a lot of words that you will remember immediately. Things like swear words. Oh, shit! F you. And of course, words that no matter what you do, you will always struggle remembering until you reach that tipping point after loads of trial and error and practice, like it was for me with the word collectivism, which I struggled with a lot when I was trying to describe the Japanese society to other people, or with words like his and her that very rarely but still confuse after 20 years of learning English and having reached a proficient level, partly because my first language doesn't have this distinction between he or she. Struggling English students waste way too much energy worrying about words or vocabulary that they forget. But successful English communicators know that because the more you read, the more you come across, the more you listen to the same word, and the more times you use those words in conversations, the better you will get at them. They keep reminding themselves that it's okay to forget words, because forgetting is just part of the learning process. It's basically feedback that you may not have learned that vocabulary well enough for you to remember, and it gives you another chance for you to look at it again, review it effectively, so you remember the next time you need it. And make sure you watch this video if you need some consolation and help with understanding how forgetting is just part of the whole process of building your vocabulary. For the best results for your fluency, just keep consistently going. Not understanding that learning to speak English fluently is a process. Or, if I could quote one of my favorite business coaches, basically spend as much time listening to, watching, or reading something in English as you can. Focus on reviewing and learning well the vocabulary that you want to remember in the long term, and make sure you use that vocabulary in conversations as a way to remember vocabulary in the long term. And now that we talk about using vocabulary in conversations as an extremely powerful way for you to remember vocabulary in the long term, let's look back at the building analogy I was sharing with you at the beginning. Because I imagine building your fluency like building a huge, extremely massive building, where each room, each apartment, each brick, each wall can be one little sub-skill of speaking that you need to get better at. Because when people come to me and say, I need your help with speaking English fluently, and I always tell them I'd be honored to be their coach and help them change their whole life, because I just understand how speaking English fluently can transform their lives. But I always ask them the same question. What do you want to be better at speaking about? Do you want to improve asking polite questions? Get better at presenting survey results? Or perhaps sharing your opinion effectively? Each of these are what we call sub-skills of speaking English that we pick with my students and then start working at them so they could gradually build up their confidence in those sub-skills over time. Saying I want to speak English fluently but I can't is like expecting to start building the roof or the rooftop bar at the top of the building but not having either strong foundations or walls at the lower levels of the building. We simply can't expect to speak English without hesitation, completely improvising the whole conversation, and can't talk about things confidently and freely that we haven't had the necessary amount of practice in over time and that we don't have enough vocabulary about. But just like with a building, you may not be able to build the whole building in a week. You can start with just one brick and one wall and start building the first room or the first apartment of that building. Just pick the one you want to build and focus on that one sub-skill and get gradually better at it by practicing over time. And if you need some more support with this, you want to get some free fluency training so you really understand what exactly you need to do in each stage of your English learning journey, make sure you head over to the link right down in the description and check out the page to get access to my free English community called Build Your Fluency. And by joining us, you might find loads of inspiration so you finally start believing that speaking English fluently is all possible for you as well, as long as you chunk it all down and focus on building the skills, the sub skills that you'll need to get better and better and better at speaking English. And who knows, you might get inspired by some of our most active members who will also share with you their own experience, so you can finally start believing that yes, it's all possible for you as well. You can learn to speak English fluently and confidently as long as you pick one small thing to focus on, to practice again and again, so you get better and better and better at it, and so you no longer ask yourself what to study in English to make faster progress. What is the next cluster of puzzle pieces you're going to put down in that massive puzzle? What topics you're going to find out more vocabulary about? And also, what is the next brick you're going to pick up and place where it's supposed to be? What sub-skill of communication you're going to start practicing from now on? Let me know in the comments if you got some inspiration. I honestly can't wait to be back on your screen with another video.